loves, and welcome back to I'm on Your Side with me, your host, Sierra Boudreau. I hope you've been having a really good week. I feel like, as we've talked about, the weeks just fly by so quickly. It's already Thursday when I'm recording this, and I feel like I blinked and got here. It was just Saturday night, I swear to God, and now it's Thursday, and that's just the life of an adult. As an adult, time goes by so much quicker than it did as a kid. I feel like as a kid, days just seemed longer, and weeks seemed longer, and months definitely seemed longer. I remember being a child and summer felt like it was forever, and now as an adult, summer has gone by so quickly. It's already July, and that feels insane to me, but just, I guess, a reminder to make the most of our days and our weeks and our months and try not to wish them away. I have a pretty bad habit of doing that. I think I'm like, oh, I can't wait for this, or I can't wait for that, something so far in the future, and then I get there and I look back and realize that I wish so much of my life away, and there's so much that I could have done or so much that I could have experienced that I just chose not to because I was so hyper focused on the next big thing. So that's just my lead in, but I guess we can get right into the intro of where are we going, what am I doing, all that stuff. Last week, we didn't even get a chance to talk about LA because Hallie was on the podcast. The episode was so much fun. You guys are loving it, and that makes me so happy. I loved having Hallie on. She is one of my very best friends, and as you can tell in that episode, we just click so well and mesh together so well, and I'm so thankful that she would just be on the pod, and I'm so thankful that you guys listened and really loved it, and now you get to know Hallie a little bit more because I know I talk about her all the time, and so now you have an idea of who she is. But if you missed that one, it is last week's episode, Two Girls, One Thought. I think it's an hour-long episode. It's kind of juicy. I cut it down for like an hour and a half. We were yapping. We had so much to say, and I had to cut it down. I was like, look, we don't do normally episodes over an hour here at I'm on Your Side, and so to do an hour and a half episode, that just seemed kind of like a lot, but I do want to have more guests. I think that when we drop off season 1 and pick back up season 2, the intention is probably to have more guests on the podcast. That's what I'm thinking right now. That said, I don't know how much longer season 1 is going to be. I don't have an intention of stopping anytime soon, and so I think that I might do really long seasons and then short breaks in between seasons, and those breaks are just to line up my guests, pre-record those episodes, get some ideas of what I want to do next season, all that stuff. So no cause for alarm. The podcast isn't going away anytime soon. We still have a lot left in season 1, but I did want to give you guys a heads up that I am thinking I'm going to break it up into seasons. I think that it's really important as someone who creates and someone who shares life experiences that I actually go out and gain some life experiences so that I can come back and talk to you guys about things that maybe you're interested in or things that you're going through at the same time. And obviously I can do that week by week, and that is kind of what we do week by week, but I think taking some time off and getting some fresh perspective is really important and really is going to help the podcast along. And I think that it'll be better for you guys too, because you know how sometimes you'll listen to music or read a Substack or whatever, you're engaging with some creative and you feel like they're saying the same thing over and over because they haven't gone out and lived any more life and nothing has changed for them. That is what I want to avoid in this podcast. I want to actually go out there and gain some experiences, live some life, come back and talk to you guys about that. And I just feel like so much is changing right now. I'm 25, in case you guys didn't know. I'm 25 right now, and I feel like so much is changing in my life right now. Things that I've been waiting for and hoping for are finally coming to fruition, which feels absolutely insane to me because it's one of those things that I felt was so far off and so far away, and I blink and here I am in this phase of my life, and I'm really excited about it and really hopeful about the future and what's to come. But it's also kind of overwhelming because it's like, wait, I feel like I was just 17, and then I feel like I was just 22, and now I feel like I'm 25, and before I know it I'm gonna be 28, and that's just kind of how time works. That's what I was saying at the beginning of the episode. But I'm trying to enjoy where I am right now, and where I am is in a really sweet spot, but also a very transitional spot, and I want to take you guys along with that and talk to you guys about that, obviously, because I feel like a lot of us are within the same age range and are mid to late 20s and going through a lot of changes. A lot of my friends right now are getting married. A lot of my friends right now are either getting married or have been married for a couple of years, and so they're looking to start having kids and buying houses and making big moves. A lot of my friends are also going through these transitional periods, and it is just so fun, especially the friends that I have grown up with and have known since we were kids or teenagers. Watch them find the people they're going to marry, watch them buy their dream houses, watch them get into careers that they love, watch them grow up and grow into the people that they've always said they were going to be. That is really the most special for me, I feel, so proud of all of my friends, and I feel so proud of all of you guys. I know that when we do, you're going to be fine this week. You guys like to comment what's coming up for your week, and it is so fun whenever you guys come back and tell me like, oh, that job I was telling you about, I got it, or I moved, or I broke up with that loser boyfriend. I love that one. That is one of my favorite ones. But whenever you guys tell me these big changes that you're making in your lives or things that you are looking forward to, that means so much to me, and I'm so thankful that you guys would share it with me. So all of that to say, we didn't get to do a big intro last week, and so we didn't get to talk about LA. And you guys, LA was the best. We were only there for 3 days, only one full day, and so I didn't really get a long extended trip there, but for the 3 days that we were there, I absolutely loved it. I had so much fun. It is beautiful and it felt good. It felt the way that I thought it was going to feel. I think that part of me felt a little bit nervous because it's like, what if I put this place on a pedestal and I am really excited about it and I go and I feel disappointed by it or let down by it, and then on the flip side of it, go on vacation or to try out a place and you see everything with rose-colored glasses and everything looks perfect, and then you move there and it's entirely different. I know that I felt kind of that way about Denver, that I came to visit a few times and loved it every time I visited, but when I moved here, the reality set in that I actually live here, and that felt kind of overwhelming to me at first because it's like, oh, I can't just go to my regular places. I need to find new regular places. I need to find new friends. I need to find new comfort spots. Like everything just feels new. And so loved LA, really hopeful about that place, really excited, but also because I've done a big move in my past, I can acknowledge that when/if Alex and I do move there, it's going to feel different than visiting. And obviously we're going to visit more. And we have plans to go to San Diego at the end of the month. I think the end of the month or the beginning of next month. And I'm really excited about that because I've never been to San Diego, but one of my good friends actually lives in San Diego with her now husband. Alex and I flew to Jersey. Was it last month or the month before last for her wedding? It was May, actually. So it was a little bit ago, but we flew out for their wedding and they live in San Diego. So I want to see them. I'm really looking forward to San Diego. Like I said, never been. I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be great. And that is also just like an option for us to move to. We know for sure we want to be on the coast. We want to be by the water. And so we're just kind of like feeling out our options. Florida is just like not an option because I do enjoy having rights. No offense to the girlies who live in Florida and love it. I just don't think that I would live in Florida and love it. So we're thinking California, but that's all up in the air. Obviously, I'll tell you guys as things change and shift and evolve and as we get closer to it. It's one of those situations where we could move in a week or we could move next year. We really don't know. It all depends on when Alex gets his transfer. As you guys, I think, know, he works for an airline. And so he can transfer very often if he wants to, but it just depends on if a transfer that we want to move to opens up. And then everything goes super quick from there. And so I think that it's one of those situations where like I know that I want to go and I'm really excited and eager to be there. But I also think that the minute we get the call that we can go, reality is going to set in and it's going to be like, oh, I have to pack my entire life here. And then I have to say goodbye to my friends and my favorite spots. And I don't know that I'll realize how much I love Denver until I'm faced with the actual option to leave it. I know that I can leave at any time, but you know what I mean. I think that Denver has really been so special for me and so great for me in the time that I've been here, but I feel this itch and this calling to go. And I feel that towards California, but it's like, I just really don't know. I could a month from now be living there. You know, just life is so crazy and things go so fast. And so I'm just trying to enjoy where I am right now, but at the same time, like be eager and excited about being somewhere else and listening to myself and listening to that desire to be somewhere else. So LA was great. San Diego hopefully is going to be great. And that is that. But I don't have really that many other updates. I think that everything is pretty even keeled. Actually, I do have one big update. And okay. I told myself and I told my friends, I was like, I'm not going to talk about this because I would rather wait and what if this and what if that. But I tell you guys 90% of what's going on with me, and this feels like a really big change that I'm making. So I recently decided to get off of birth control, and which is like, I really didn't know that I was going to talk to you guys about this. And I want to do a full episode on it way down the line when I feel more familiar with my body and more familiar with the changes and everything. But I decided to get off of hormonal birth control because I have been on it since I was 19 years old. old. And like I said, I'm now 25, and that's just a lot of time to be on hormones. I'm reading the book, Your Brain on Birth Control, and it is really fascinating and really eye-opening. And there's just things like behaviors that I've had that I didn't always have. And I've been reflecting a lot on how I feel like I am a very different person now than I used to be. And every time I've thought about this, I have just talked it up to like, well, you're maturing and you're growing up and, whatever, like you've moved away and obviously things change. And while those things are true, I feel this fundamental core difference. And I've been wondering what that was for a really long time. And I think that I pinpointed that the big shift happened when I started birth control. And so now I'm on the journey to get off of birth control. And I think that and one of the reasons why I'm sharing it with you guys here is because I'm thinking about reviving my Substack and writing all about my journey of getting off of birth control and kind of being centered around that. I have really been wanting to write more again, and I think that I just needed a clear thing to write about. And I think what I'm going to be writing about is my transition. And I think what I'm going to be writing about is my transition off of birth control and the reintroduction to myself, hormone-free, and seeing who that is, what that feels like, if I am like I remembered myself being, or if I am entirely new, and what I feel like, what my body does, what my skin does, what like everything does. I'm just really excited to get to know myself again without birth control. And I think that I was like, I don't really want to share that because of course, there's always fear, like, what if I pop up pregnant? And y'all are like, well, I told you that was going to happen because you got off birth control. Believe me, we are being as safe as we can be without birth control. I'm using natural cycles, and we're also using like other forms of contraception. And so I'm not really super worried about pregnancy. But I was talking in therapy earlier about the fact that like I'm 25. I am very financially stable. I am in a wonderful relationship. I have a second bedroom, for crying out loud. Like, if I got pregnant right now, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And that's not me wishing pregnancy. That is not me hoping for pregnancy. That is just me acknowledging that the worst case scenario, in quotes, is actually not that bad of a scenario, if that makes sense. And I think that I was afraid of sharing with you guys that I was getting off birth control because what if I did get pregnant, and then what if I get judged, or what if I get shamed, or whatever. And then I realized that the audience that I have curated in the community that we have here is not an audience or community that would shame me or judge me in any way. Also, I'm a grown adult woman. So what I do with my body is completely my choice, and anyone else's opinions really should have no weight on it. It's one of those things though that I talked to you guys about a couple of episodes ago, where when you say something online, you kind of have to just be prepared to hear opinions about it, because once it's out there, people naturally are going to have opinions about it, and people feel the need to tell you their best stories or their horror stories or whatever, because I think that people naturally just want to give advice, however unsolicited it may be. And so all that to say, I'm not really looking for a bunch of advice. I'm doing my own research and talking to my doctors and listening to my body and all that stuff. So I'm not really looking for a ton of advice, but I am really, really happy with my decision. And I do think that I want to revive that Substack and talk about it throughout this whole journey with you guys. And I have been talking in therapy a lot about how I have been thinking about 2024 and what this year looks like and means for me. And I think that I just kind of felt like it was a filler year for a little bit there. I was like, well, nothing super exciting is happening. Nothing super big is happening. It's just kind of mundane, go with the flow, whatever. Something big is coming. It's just not yet. And then I reflected on all the changes that I've made this year. I have made a lot of personal changes this year, not necessarily huge sweeping career moves. I'm not writing a book just yet. The podcast hasn't been picked up by a podcast company yet. Like, career-wise, I am doing well, and I'm really, really happy in my career, but personally, I've made a lot of changes, and I have been really intentional with therapy. I quit drinking. I'm now stopping birth control, and so this year really isn't a filler year. I think that this year is actually more intentional than I originally thought that it was, and I'm really thankful for that. It's kind of my rambling for the intro. I don't have much else. I will keep you guys updated on that Substack. You'll see it all over my Instagram, of course, probably my TikTok when I talk about it there. And I want to get right into the episode. This episode I thought about yesterday. I was getting a facial. I go to Heyday. I love Heyday if you're in Denver, but they have them all over. So if you have a Heyday by you, I can't speak to all the other ones, but the one in Denver that I go to really I think is incredible, but mostly because I found a great esthetician. But I was in my facial yesterday and I got to talking with my esthetician, whom I adore. I talked to you guys about her before. I think you are familiar with just like our synchronicities and how great right? I think that she is, but we were talking yesterday about joy and how I said something, a quote that I had heard a while ago, how our greatest act of resistance is our joy, which led us into a deeper conversation about choosing joy, finding joy, creating joy, all of that stuff. And it's just been kind of like swirling around in my brain. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you guys about it because I feel like joy is one of those things where sometimes it is so easy to pick up on and find and gravitate towards, and sometimes it feels like it is not there whatsoever at all, and you have to work so hard to find it. And because sometimes you cannot find it, that means you have to create it. We're going to talk all about that this episode, so let's get into it. I say it to you guys all the time, and we talk about it a lot, honestly, that there's always joy, there's always goodness, there's always abundance to be found, but it's one of those things where you hear and it sounds great and it sounds, whatever, but then it's like, how do I actually find that? How do I actually get that into my life, and where do I even look for it? And so I wanted to talk about that with you guys and start off by saying that it has not always been easy for me to find joy, but it has always been beneficial. It's one of those things where you kind of have to get into the habit of it and the routine of it, and you have to break out of the mindset that all this goodness is just going to find you, and realize that sometimes you have to find it, and it may be hidden below the cracks and the crevices, and you may have to dig, but there is going to be some of it there, and that is the good news, right? And that is the good news, right? I think that, like, oh my God, that is the good news. That is such a Christian thing to say. It's sometimes I find myself when I'm speaking, like, reverting back to my religious background and like bringing in some of that vernacular and some of that language into what we do here, because I do think that there's some overlap, right? I think that some of the gospel, so to say, is centered around good news, centered around hope and positivity and all of those things. And of course, some of it is like hard to get through and all that stuff. You're familiar with the story, but I find that sometimes I revert to that because that is, I think, how I came into my way of thinking, which, like, we've talked about my religious background on the podcast before. And I think that sometimes I look at it through the lens of like all of the trauma that I picked up from it and all the ways that it hurt me. But there's also some things in it that really did benefit me and change my worldview and my way of thinking in a positive way. And that actually ties right into what we're talking about this episode, where we can find joy in things that maybe right off the bat you don't think to find joy in. And I think that the church is one of those things where there were some negatives and some really big pain points. There were also some really big positives for me. I met my very absolute best friend through the church, and I learned how to speak kindly about myself and how to see the best in people, of course, in between spouts of judging them, right? Because that's just kind of how it goes. But I learned a lot of habits around like trying to find goodness in situations, and I think that I've carried that with me. While I have left the church and removed myself from that exact area of my life, I think that some of the lessons I've definitely carried with me, and they pop up sometimes, like me saying, and that is the good news, and let the church say amen. I think that when we are intentional in looking for something, we're going to find it. So whether that be goodness, whether that be joy, whether that be happiness, whether that be abundance, or whether that be sadness, whether that be depression, whether that be fear, whether that be hopelessness, that whatever you're looking for, it is like the universe is going to give it to you right in front of your face, and you will have no option but to be confronted with it head first. And what you're going to do with it is what dictates kind of the next move, and so on and so on. It's like when you want a car, for example, and like you start thinking about it. Like when I wanted a Bronco, every time I got on the road, I was seeing Bronco after Bronco. And yes, part of that is that there are a million Broncos on the road, but also part of that is that I was just looking for them. It was in my subconscious. And when something is in your subconscious, it pops up in ways that you don't necessarily even expect. I didn't even realize I was looking all over the road for Broncos, but as soon as I saw one, I was like, oh. And now I drive a Mazda CX-5, and now I feel like I see CX-5s everywhere. That said, CX-5s are also a very popular car, especially in Colorado. But like now that it's on my brain and in my subconscious, it just feels like it's kind of everywhere around me. And I think the same thing goes for our emotions and things that we're looking for in that way. And people say all the time, like, our thoughts influence our behaviors and yada yada. And it's like, okay, well, what does that really mean? And I think that what that means is if you are constantly looking for something to be afraid of, if you are constantly looking for something to be on guard for, you are definitely going to find that. It is always around us. And it's really up to us to decide what we're going to pay attention to. And I found that I used to be someone who was always on the lookout for negative things because I wanted to protect myself against them. And I thought if I keep my eyes open and I'm super vigilant, then I can avoid it. And that really wasn't doing me any favors. I wasn't avoiding anything. It just seemed like everywhere I looked, I was finding something to be disappointed in. I was finding something to be afraid of. I was finding a reason to be ashamed. I was always finding something, even though my intention behind it was to avoid it. I wasn't avoiding it at all because, like I said, the universe knows exactly what we're looking for and it's going to give it to us. And so I remind myself that whatever I'm looking for, I can find. I just have to be awake to notice it. I just have to be there to notice it. And that is one of those things that when I've been in depressive episodes, I have found that I am not awake to notice anything. I don't notice any goodness. I don't notice any joy. I don't notice any hope. I just notice how dark and sad and down I am. And obviously that is not necessarily my fault. Like, depression is part of my bipolar disorder. And so sometimes I go into these depressive episodes and that is just part of it. And I always come out of it. And I'm so thankful for that. But part of me coming out of that is finally opening my eyes and the fog gets lifted. I'm like, oh, wait, actually, there is something here. There is something good here. And I just have to hold on to it. Even if it is absolutely minuscule, I have to hold on to it because that thing is going to lead me to another thing. And then before I know it, I'm digging myself out of this hole that I've been in. And that is something to be proud of, which is another thing to find joy in, like your own pride for yourself. I talked one time on TikTok about how my love language has changed a lot from words of affirmation to being like acts of service and receiving gifts, because that feels to me like somebody is thinking of me and cares for me. And words of affirmation used to be my top love language, but as I have grown closer to myself and really started to value my own affirmation, other people's and external validation starts to mean less and less to me. Not that it's not sweet to hear, and it is nice to hear, but it is not the same life-giving energy that external affirmation used to give me. Now when I really, really need words of affirmation, I find them within myself. So I talked about that online, and then somebody commented like, how did you get here? And I think that part of it comes with the job that I do. And I was talking about this in therapy too. With the job that I do, I'm getting a lot of positive comments and then I'm getting some negative comments. And it is human nature, obviously, to pay attention to the negative comments. But it was really, really hard for me to say, like, when I get positive comments, this is going to stick with me and this means something to me. But when I get negative comments, this means nothing to me. It was really, really hard to create that difference because why do I value some words from strangers, but I don't value other words from strangers? Why is it that there's only value in their words if they are nice to me? And there's no value in the words if they're not nice to me. And so over time, I just kind of realized that maybe there's not a lot of value in and so over time, I started to just kind of reframe my mindset and find that there is value in somebody being kind to me, and that does mean something to me. But ultimately, if I'm going to put that on a pedestal and I'm going to completely ignore the negative, then really the common denominator is that these are external opinions, and external opinions need to altogether mean less to me than my own opinion. It is not about these words of affirmation from other people not meaning anything at all in the way that negative comments shouldn't mean anything at all. It is simply about both of these things weighing less collectively and separately than my own affirmation and my own words towards myself. That is what matters ultimately the most. And we can talk more about that on another episode, but I kind of wanted to explain to you how I got there in a very brief way. And noticing is a habit that you have to build. It's not something that really came naturally to me. I think that noticing joy specifically, I think that it came naturally to me to notice things that were wrong or notice things that were hard and try to work on and fix those. And working on noticing joy, working on noticing abundance and goodness came kind of second to me. And so I had to reverse those and have that come first, because obviously it is important to pay attention to the hard things too, because you have to fix those and address those and work through those. But if you are only noticing those things and not really noticing the good things, then what kind of patterns and what kind of behaviors do you think you're going to pick up? And so when I am constantly looking for something to be happy about, I'm looking for something to be excited about, something to be grateful for, then I'm going to put myself in situations where I can find those things. And one way that you can build that habit is just keeping a journal and writing down a couple things you're grateful for. You don't even need to keep a journal. You could open up your notes app and just have and people say this all the time, but a gratitude list really has changed me so much. There's so many things that I forget that I was even thankful for or grateful for. And when they're gone, I'm like, oh, I wish I held on to that a little bit more. I wish I paid attention to that a little bit more. And so when I write them down down and I reflect on them and I sit with them, it feels easier for me to let them go if the time comes for them to be let go, because I know that I enjoyed it while I had it and I really paid attention to it while I had it, because naturally things are going to come and go in our lives. And if the only time we are grateful for something is when it's out the door, then we have missed out on so much opportunity there. I want to talk about controlling what you can control. And what I mean by that is like, there are things that are going to happen to us and around us and for us that we cannot necessarily control or shift or change the outcome of. And that was really uncomfortable for me, I think, because I love being in control. I love feeling like I know the active next step and creating that active next step. But that's not necessarily how the world and the universe works around us most of the time. I find that a lot of things happen and we kind of have to decide what we're going to do from it. That said, you do have more control than you think that you do, and you have more choice than you think that you do. I used to be a things are happening to me kind of person, where everything good, everything bad was happening to me. I wasn't making anything happen. I wasn't creating anything. I wasn't building anything. Whatever happened was just a hand that was dealt, and I had to decide what to do with it. And once I realized that I actually can change my own life and I can create the world that I want to live in, so much opened up for me, and I was so much less anxious, I think, because it's okay, yes, some things are going to happen to me, and I decide where to go from those things. But I can't just sit around and wait for those things to happen. I have to create things. I have to make things happen. One of the examples that I have is like the podcast, right? I know that one day I want to do public speaking. I know that one day I want to write a book. And there's no way for me to get chosen if I don't put myself out there to be chosen from. Somebody isn't just going to pluck me out of my apartment where I'm not saying anything, I'm not doing anything, I'm not putting myself out there and say, you're the one we want. That's just impossible. You have to put yourself out there. And when you acknowledge that you do deserve to be chosen and you do deserve to have your natural talents and the things that you want come to fruition, you are so much more willing to actually show up. I can't control when I'm going to get a book deal. I can't control when I'm going to go on my first public speaking tour. I can't control those things. I don't know those things right now, but I can control all the things that are going to lead me to that. And I can keep showing up and keep doing these things even when I don't want to, even when it's hard. And that's what I mean about creating joy, creating opportunity, creating abundance, that you have to set yourself up to be chosen. You have to set yourself up for the next step, even if the next step takes months or years or whatever it may be. Even if the next step isn't until I'm 45 years old, I know that every single day I'm doing something that allows me to get there. It's not about it happening right now, right when I want it, right when I think that I need it. Because we talk about all the time, if I got all the things that I thought that I wanted when I was X years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, whatever years old, I would be pretty unhappy now, because I've been allowed to change my mind and to grow and to evolve and all of that stuff. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so thankful that all the things that I thought that I wanted and changed my mind about have led me to this thing, because this feels the best and the most natural to me. And all the other things I think were things that I was doing because I felt like maybe I should be doing them, or I saw other people doing them and they seemed really happy about it. And once I realized, I actually don't have to do what everyone else is doing. I don't have to try to be what everyone else is being. I can just be my own person and show up whatever way that looks like. I felt so much more confident and so much more secure in the things that I was saying. And I think that that lands more with you guys, right? When I actually believe what I'm saying, you guys can believe me when I'm saying it to you. It makes no sense for me to come on here and just start saying things that I picked up from the internet that I think might land with you guys because they've landed with other people's audiences. And you guys are going to listen to that and be like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? That doesn't sound like it's actually coming from you. I think that part of the connection, a huge part of the connection that you and I have, is a level of vulnerability and honesty that we can both bring to these conversations. And I can only do that if I'm willing to show up as and be myself. Whatever that looks like, even if that makes people uncomfortable, even if that makes people not want to be here, I can only do that because what else do I have if not my own words, my own thoughts, my own experiences? And I want to talk really quickly about creating routines that you can actually stick to that spark and inspire joy. Not things that you've seen online that really don't land with you, but you think maybe if I do it, I'll be happy like them. That does not work. That does not work. That does not work, my love. It never works. If you see somebody deep cleaning, scrubbing top to bottom your apartment on Sundays because that brings them joy, the thought of doing that actually makes you feel exhausted. You don't have to do that just because it works for them. You have to find routines and systems that work for you in a way that you're actually going to do them. Routines aren't beneficial if you're not going to do it. Building up systems does not work if you don't actually want to participate in the system's upkeep, right? One of the things that I do every week without fail that sparks joy is getting fresh flowers for the apartment. I put some in the office, in the living room, in the bedroom. It brings me so much joy. It's something that I'm actually going to do every week. It is not a huge time commitment. It's not a huge financial commitment. It's just something that I do every week because it lasts me throughout the week. And every time I come into the office and I sit down and I look at the bouquet of flowers on my desk, I'm like, oh, I did that for myself. The joy is in the fact that I did that for myself. I spent the time, that I spent the money, that I spent the effort doing something that I knew was going to bring me joy throughout the week. Sometimes it's like, okay, you need to create joy every single day and you need to do something every single day. And like, oh my God, I don't have it in me sometimes to do it every single day. Sometimes I need to set it up once a week and let that residual joy spill over throughout my days rather than thinking every single day I need to be intentional about doing something that sparks joy. Let joy be sparked passively. Another thing that brings me a lot of joy is my morning routine. And the only reason my morning routine brings me a lot of joy is because I've created a morning routine that I actually want to do. I have a whole episode on the morning routine. If you guys haven't listened to it and you want to go back and listen to it, it really, really works for me. And the only reason I can do it consistently and the only reason it makes me happy is because I've created one that actually works for me. It's not about what I've seen everyone else doing and what I've seen everyone else enjoying. It is about cutting all that stuff out and only getting down to the things that I know spark joy in me, because I know I'm not going to do it if I don't actually enjoy it. I have never been a person who can force myself to do things and say, okay, if you just get through it, you're going to feel better. If I have to suffer through something to feel better later, I actually don't want to do it. I don't really want to invite a lot of suffering into my life in the hope that I feel better later. I want to invite things into my life that I know are going to bring me what I want and then run towards those things rather than just running aimlessly at what I see everyone else doing or participating in and hoping that something sticks for me and something just like happens to leave a little bit of goodness and joy behind. That's just not how it works for me personally. Your routine can be quite literally anything that makes you feel good that you enjoy doing. If you like to go to Pilates class 5 times a week and that brings you a lot of joy, make time in your schedule to go to Pilates class 5 times a week. If you only want to go 2 times a week and that brings you joy, go twice. If you don't want to go to Pilates at all because it's fuck Pilates and you rather just go on a walk with your friends, do that. When we are passive about joy and goodness in our lives, we find that we actually are lacking it. We have to be really, really intentional about it because there are naturally things that are going to stress us out, that are going to upset us, that are going to put us down. Things like having a shitty day at work. And you're going to have shitty days at work, right? But if you know, okay, I'm having a really bad day at work, but today at 4:30 p.m., I get to go to my spin class and that brings me a lot of joy, so be it. If I get to come home and I get to make that recipe that I've been looking forward to all week and that sparks joy, so be it. If I get to spend time with the dogs, like whatever it is, be intentional about it. Set aside time to do it because don't you think you deserve that? Don't you think that after you give out 40 hours a week to work and then you give out 5 hours a week to your friends and then you give out X amount of hours a week to your partner and then to your dogs and then to your apartment care, whatever, don't you think that you deserve some intentional time for yourself? Why is it that you know every single day, 5 times a week, you're going to go into work for 8 hours a day or more? Because oftentimes people are working more. You're going to go do that, but you don't want to give yourself an hour every week just to be by yourself, for yourself, doing something that is only benefiting you. You deserve to do things sometimes that only benefit you, not anyone else, because you do so many things that benefit other people, whether directly or indirectly. And honestly, doing things that benefit yourself indirectly benefits other people. You can only be as good to other people as you can be to yourself. I've learned that the hard way, and it really is a lesson that has stuck with me long term. But I also wanted to talk to you guys about being wary of doing things that you think are going to spark joy, but actually lead you farther away from it. One of my big habits that I've been working on a lot lately, and by working on, I mean trying to work on, like the beginning of working on, is that when I'm upset about something, when I'm happy about something, when I have any kind of emotion, I want to shop. When I'm having a really good day, I want to shop to celebrate. When I'm having a really hard day, I want to shop to make myself feel better. I am an emotional shopper in the way that some people are emotional eaters or emotional exercisers, whatever. I'm an emotional shopper. And I'm working on that because every time I shop and then I get it in the mail or I bring it home and I look at it, I'm like, oh, while this is nice to have and fun to have, what about my life has changed because I have this thing? Really nothing. Now I just have another thing to care about. Now I have another thing to tend to and keep up with and whatever. Or now I have another thing that I realize I'm not going to wear or not going to touch and I'm going to have to donate it. And then that becomes another responsibility, another task. I've been asking myself a lot lately, what is this item going to bring to my life? And if the answer is it's just another thing, that I've been trying really hard to not get it, because I don't need a bunch of things that don't do anything for me. I don't need a bunch of things that don't benefit me in any way. Just because I can buy it, just because I have access to it, doesn't mean that I need to. And for so long, it was just, oh, well, if I just shop, I'll feel better. Oh, if I just get this thing, I'll feel better. And I really didn't feel better. It's the same thing with like, if you emotionally eat and you're like, okay, well, if I just go and I get whatever I want and then I come home and I eat it, I'm going to feel better. And I'm going to have, gotten myself a little treat. And that little treat becomes a really big treat. And then that treat isn't really a treat at all because then you don't feel good. It makes you feel sluggish or tired or bloated or whatever. Like sometimes we do things because we think it's going to give us this end result, and it actually doesn't, and yet we keep going back to it. That's how I felt with drinking too. I kept thinking drinking is going to make me have a really good time. Drinking is going to make me feel connected with everyone. Drinking is going to make me feel like I'm having a lot of fun, and it really wasn't making me feel that way. So why was it that week after week I was going back to something that I knew didn't make me feel good? It's like people who are like, drinking constantly gives me anxiety and it makes me feel like shit, and I just learned to deal with that aftermath. It's like, okay, instead of learning to deal with the aftermath, let's just have a little bit of foresight. If drinking gives you raging anxiety every single time you partake, maybe drinking is the problem. But I understand that we're not all like ready to get to the root of that, and it can feel easier said than done. I totally get that. I'm just asking you to think about this week, the thing that you run to because you think it's going to spark something that really doesn't, and maybe think about the ways that you can start limiting that or cutting back on that. I'm not saying completely eradicate it. I'm not saying if you're an emotional shopper, cutting up your credit cards, removing Apple Pay from your phone, and never buying a single thing that you don't absolutely need ever again. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that instead of just buying it willy-nilly without even thinking about the consequences of it, just asking yourself that question, what is this going to bring to my life? What is this going to do for me? That's not just with shopping. That's with any impulsive behavior that you recognize isn't actually benefiting you and may actually even be hurting you. I just wanted to finish off this episode with a reminder that you are in charge. You are in charge. You can decide what you want to do, what you want to think about, how that's going to influence your behaviors. You are in charge. If you're doing something that you don't like, you can stop doing it. If you want to pay attention to something, pay attention to goodness. If you want to work towards something, you can. Like, just because things happen to us and around us doesn't mean that we're not in charge of how we respond to them and what we build off of them. Completely separate from what happens to us, what we create just because we want to, just because we are innovative, creative beings. Like, we were meant to create, innovate, make something shake. And so you can do that for yourself whenever you want to. But thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I am so thankful that we get to join here every week and have these kind of conversations and just feel more connected. This podcast, as I say every single week, I know I get sappy every single week and I'm working on it, but it just means so much to me. And I'm so thankful for the community that we have here. And I'm working on uploading it to YouTube too. So if you are someone who listens on Apple Podcasts, I know that you can't see the video. If you listen on Spotify, you can see the video, but it is on your phone, so it's a bit smaller. So I'm working on uploading it to YouTube, and then you'll be able to see it. But that is all I have for you guys this week, and I will see you next week. And before then, I'll see you on TikTok, I'll see you on Instagram. All of that stuff is in the description box below. So I will see you around, and I love you so much, and I'm on your side. Mwah.